pronouns are they, them. Please refrain from referring to me in a gendered manner, and you're welcome to refer to me as Chair or Chairperson Lundy. I am declaring that we do have a quorum present for our meeting today. The purpose of this meeting is to act on important business related to the Colorado Natural Medicine Health Act. The board will make its decisions on agenda items today based upon written materials provided for its consideration in advance of this meeting. The public is welcome to listen in and observe the workings of the board. This is not a stakeholder engagement forum, however, and the public should not address the board unless requested by the board. Attendees will be muted to ensure the board is able to efficiently conduct its business as is set forth on the agenda. Thank you again for attending today's meeting and for your interest in these important matters. A few housekeeping items as we get started. I would like to ask everyone to turn your cell phones to silent. If you have to leave the meeting at any point, please let me know so that we can reflect that in the meeting minutes. The same goes for your return. Please do not use the chat function if it's enabled for you on your Zoom. Please also make sure that your name reflects your pronouns. As a place for us to begin, I said yes to this board because I believe in the transformative nature of natural medicines, and I celebrate the legislative mandates of diversity and integration and how we advise the regulated space towards safety, equity, and cultural responsibility. I invite us all to hold multidimensional consciousness of these dynamics as we discuss the first draft of our recommendations today. And on a personal note, to my knowledge, I am the first openly transgender chairperson of a DORA regulatory board in Colorado's history, and I can't tell you what an honor it is to serve in this role. Thank you all for entrusting me to lead us well. At November and December's full board meetings, I requested board members to share meeting sustainability this year with our program director, Lori Braden. And what's universally clear is that we all need less meetings. Our program director, Lori, and senior advisor, Sam, will speak in more depth toward our plan for meetings this year, but I just want to thank board members for proactively sharing our needs so that we can engage this important work with sustainable consistency. I also want to thank the public for volunteering your time as well. Today's meeting mission is to sign off on version 10 of our initial recommendations. After today, Program Director Lori and her team will translate these recommendations to rules, and at the full board meetings in February and March, we will have an opportunity to provide feedback. So in short, this is only the beginning. We've been doing this work together for a little over 9 months, and in a way, we're parents to a new life called the Colorado Natural Medicine Regulated Sector, and I look forward to our diverse and integrative work together, both today and in the future. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and do roll call. Chairperson Lundy is here. Vice Chair Dr. Connor is absent, correct? Okay. Dr. Tina Gonzales?
I am here, present.
Great to see you. Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estés Reyes?
Present.
Great to see you, Doctor.
Thank you, Wendy.
Commissioner Wendy Buxton-Andrade?
I'm here.
Thank you. Dr. Sofia Chavez?
Present. Thank you.
Great to see you. Skippy Upton-Mesirow?
Present. So nice to be back.
Great to see you. Ricardo Baca? Is Ricardo absent?
I don't see him here currently.
Okay.
He's still around.
Okay. Sheriff David Lucero? I saw the sheriffs.
His screen is up, but maybe his mute is on.
President, can you hear me now?
We sure can. Hey, Sheriff.
Afternoon. I could not change my pronoun.
Okay, no problem. You're quite quiet, so my understanding is your pronouns are he, him, yes?
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah, great to see you. Well done.
Present, and I'm he, him. I think I was able to change it in my profile. Thank you.
You bet. Great to see you, Will.
You too, Chair.
Dr. Joshua Goodwin. Is Dr. Goodwin with us?
Don't believe so.
Okay. Dr. Alisa Hannum.
Present, and my pronouns are she, her. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hannum. Dr. Sue Sisley.
I am present, pronoun she, her, and ready for this big day.
Let's do it. Billy Wynne.
I'm here. Thank you. Yeah.
Great to see ya. Stacie Loucks.
I'm here and my pronouns are she, her. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacie. Dominique Mendiola, our DOI representative.
Good afternoon. I'm present and my pronouns are she, her. It's nice to see everyone.
You too. Now I would like to hand it over to our magnificent program director, Lori Bratton, for introductions.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Lundy Bratton. I'm the Advisory Board's Natural Medicine Program Director. Today we have Jackie Arslan, the Deputy Division Director of Program Operations. I got her title today. We have Amanda Weirs, who is the Centralized Services Manager. We have Kathy Duran, who is Program Manager for the Director Model Units. We have Jessica Fisher, who is our new analyst, who will be helping us write rules. We have Jana Contreras, who is helping us with the minutes. And of course, we have our senior advisor, Sam Baroni. We'll also move to introduce the AGs and the team. Ashley. Oh, we can't hear you.
Weird.
Can you hear me now?
You're quite quiet. I'm not sure why.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I'm Ashley Moeller. With me is Ashley Carter. We're both from the AG's office and support the program. Thank you.
And I believe we have DOR staff. Dominique introduced herself, but we also have Allison Robinette with us. Back to you, Chair.
Hi, Allison.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Lori. Now let's review the meeting minutes briefly together from our last full board meeting, and then I will ask for a motion to approve if there is no discussion after we are finished scrolling through the minutes.
I'd like to approve and to designate Director Lori Bratton with signature authority.
Second.
Thank you so much. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I think I heard 11 ayes. Any opposed or any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passes. And now let's move on to agenda item number 1. The first item on the agenda today is the program director's update. Lori, I will hand it off to you for your update. Oh, Lori, you're still muted.
There. Here it is now. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Lundy. I appreciate it. First off, I want to thank all of the board members for their commitment to developing recommendations for the agencies. As Sam has mentioned in multiple meetings, there's been now more than 75 meetings in the last 9 months and over 300 scheduled hours for these meetings. So that is a lot of time. All of the time spent in these meetings has resulted in a comprehensive document of recommendations that I believe provides us with a really great framework for the development of rules. DORA will begin first with the creation of rules for licensing and for the training program applications. And this first draft we hope to have completed and returned for you all to review in the February full board meeting. This, rulemaking phase, the first phase is going to take several months. It will include engaging stakeholders, and it will also include an opportunity for the board to both review the rules and to have discussions on the drafted rules. At the same time, we will also begin working on organizing the recommendations in a way that allows us to prioritize and to create remaining rules required for implementation in 2024. This is by no means the end of the work needed to create the regulated program. I want to be really clear on that. We are not done. There will be many more working groups, full board meetings, where you will be asked to continue to develop recommendations, to provide clarification on recommendations that have been completed and submitted, and to have further discussion on those recommendations that need more thoughtful discussion. I am very honored and proud to be the program director, and I really look forward to the work ahead of us. As the senior advisor to the advisory board, Sam Barami has been instrumental in this process, and I'm grateful for his hard work and his continued ability to work with him and his dedication. And I want to pass it to him, so if he has anything that he wants to say at this time.
Hey, thank you, Lori. I'm Sam Barami. I'm Senior Advisor on National Medicine Services. My pronouns are he, him, his. I just want to reiterate what Lori's just mentioned. I think it's important to, express how tremendous the work and the dedication of this process and from the board, as well as the non-voting participants and our public attendees, as well as the presenters that we've had join us at all of these subcommittees and board meetings, and the collaborative effort in this process. And I really have appreciated the feedback process provided by everyone who's been engaged through this, whether it's been through meetings, emails, calls. It's been instrumental in getting up into this point. And of course, the work doesn't end here. There's edits, revisions, further discussions on the recommendations and future recommendations as well. And I think it's also important in recognizing the inclusive nature of the process moving forward. I'm mindful that not everyone from the public has been able or has had the opportunity to continue feedback during our meetings. But I think it's important to assure you that in this next phase that we're going to be with the agencies are going to be doing a pretty robust input process in the coming weeks that involves hosting public meetings on the agency side to discuss the initial draft rules. And they're going to be open public meetings, and we're going to ask for feedback, comments, revisions, and we're going to provide that to the board in that process as well. And I just want to encourage and welcome active participation from our non-voting participants and all the stakeholders and people interested in this process. And I think their perspectives are going to be crucial in refining our approach and ensuring the inclusivity and effectiveness of the rules. So I just want to thank everyone for their engagement in this process, and I look forward to the next step here. So thank you.
Thank you both. Before I jump to the second agenda, I do want to let everybody know that I will be intending to take breaks every 60 minutes so that we all can have bio breaks. So I just wanted that on everybody's radar. And with that, I will hand it off to the Attorney General to also provide their update. Ashley?
Thanks. And I'm going to ask for a little latitude, Lundy. we do have an agenda item today that requires a minimum number of people present. And so if anyone could let me know if you need to jump off this call at some point, can you just vocalize that now so that I know if we need to switch the agenda around? Okay. So thank you for that. The bylaw amendment, just to give you guys the heads up, does require more than the minimum quorum number. And so we have that number right now. I don't want to lose that opportunity. So if there does come a moment where you're going to need to jump off, please let me know. We'll jump around in our agenda. But for the moment, it sounds like we're going to be okay. So the thing that I kind of want to talk about is the theme of what comes next for this board and what do we do. And so I wanted to kind of launch off from what Ms. Bratton was talking about a few minutes ago and just kind of lay this out, right? You guys have done an incredible amount of work since April, and we are all grateful for that. And thankfully, I think the big thrust of work is now under your belt, but there's more to come, as Lundy mentioned. And so what is that really going to look like? I wanted to kind of put that out in the context of legally, what does this look like from here on out? So that you had a little bit of a landscape of context for that. So this board is advisory in nature. You're aware of that. You have been spending substantial time and energy to put together what we're calling the consolidated recommendations. And that's what we're hoping to kind of bring to a close through version 10, I might add, of that full set of recommendations. But that's not really truly the full work that you're going to be doing. And that's not the end of what these recommendations are. So I wanted to take a minute to basically talk about what happens next with those. So once this board as a whole kind of ratifies the recommendations that have come out of the subcommittees, we will kind of clean up the typos and the kind of the stray grammatical errors in that document, and then we will move forward, and that document will then get transmitted to Dora, who has been supporting you this entire time, and Door Revenue, who also has been present and engaged through this process. And they will then have your recommendations in hand to start drafting rules. And so the rules are really what will govern and flesh out the legal framework of these programs. So revenue and regulatory agencies are the departments that are tasked with adopting those rules, and that will take into account all of the many substantive recommendations that you have made and are making in this set of consolidated recommendations that you have in front of you today. The rulemaking process is somewhat formal in nature, and so the way that works in essence is Dora and Dora will draft rules. Those rules will then come back to you in your full board meetings over the next few months that will look very different than the recommendations that you have now. And they are intended to create the framework of rules that will be enforced and that will govern the natural medicine program across both agencies. So the statutory framework along with the rules are what are enforced against the program and against participants within the program in terms of the licensee space, right? So the rulemaking process looks like this. The agencies will draft language for the rules. Once they've got that language drafted, they'll bring it back to this board for you to evaluate and make feedback on. The rulemaking process in Colorado also requires stakeholder engagement. So DOOR, for example, has been very effective in creating listening sessions across time to get early feedback. But once the rulemaking process starts, there's another formal process of soliciting stakeholder engagement based on the language of the rules. And so Dora will be doing that. Dora will also do that. There will be hearings where, well, there will be stakeholder engagement meetings where people can call in and participate and actively offer oral comment. There's also a written opportunity for providing comment. So you cast the net far and wide for stakeholder engagement. You, as the board, will get all of that feedback. Those sessions will be recorded, the comments will be packaged up, and you'll be expected to evaluate and review public comment and offer some thoughts on it, and make suggestions for rule change or in essence, ratification if you disagree with the comments. So that process is going to start happening over the next few months. It's a lengthy process, no doubt about it. There will be meetings that will get recorded for stakeholder engagement. There will be a period of time for written submission. You will meet and consider those things after you've had a chance to digest it and be able to offer feedback on the draft rule language. Then revenue and regulatory agencies will adopt their rules, and then they'll have to publish them. So rules are not effective until after publication in the Secretary of State website. So we're looking at a very lengthy process. If we were just, for example, if we were really looking at trying to do this at the fastest turnaround, that process is usually about 120 days. So I just want to set you up for a realistic expectation that this is not something that happens overnight. That's the first set of recommendations and rules that are rolling through this pipeline. So I understand that this is creating a program whole cloth takes time and it takes energy. You guys have put in tons of energy so far. I think there will be a first set of rules that are going to be captured by Dora, and in part they're taking an approach of what do we need to have in place initially so that this program can start moving forward. Licensure is a big piece of that. Education is a big piece of that. There may be other aspects of that, but we will get to it piecemeal. And so that first set of rules will come to you, I would imagine, either next month or the month after, so that you are ready to really give some feedback on that. Concurrent with that, though, right? I mentioned this is a lengthy process. So concurrent with that, this board will need to start drilling into the next set of recommendations. So you guys have done a ton of work and you have more to come. And so there are gaps that we already know exist in the sets of recommendations. And I think the recommendation that came out of the QLT subcommittee yesterday to create some considerations around licensure of locations outside of healing centers is a very clear example of what I'm talking about. There are no substantive recommendations on that. The recommendation is, let's not lose sight of this. We need to do this. So in our next wave of recommendations, you'll be asked to consider and formulate recommendations on the gaps that we haven't filled in yet and new areas that we haven't gotten to yet. So that process will start in the next couple of months, but we'll be doing that concurrently with trying to refine the language of the first set of rules. So I just wanted to give you kind of that broad overview because I know that there are a lot of questions about kind of what comes next. You guys have you're kind of putting the bow around this set of consolidated recommendations, but there is work that will happen behind the scenes to move those recommendations into rule. So just recognize the consolidated recommendation document is not part of Colorado law. It is recommendations to the regulatory agencies, both DORA and DOR, to fold those into rules that then become the force of law following a formalized rulemaking process. Yes, Mr. Wynne.
Thank you very much, Ashley, for that clear overview. Just one quick question to get a little clearer understanding on my part. For the first bucket of recommendation or regulations that you're going to send, maybe as early as next month, are those all of the regulations that need to be put in place for the program to go live, or will that universe of regulations be in tranches, and the very first will be, like you said, accreditation and certification, where people have to get trained, as soon as possible for the program to go live as soon as possible? So is it, all of them that need to be done, or really it's you're tranching all of them that need to be done in a kind of the most urgent, prioritized way?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. They will be in waves. So we will not have everything put in front of you in the next month or so. I'll call it 60 days, right? So in the next 60 days, you will see what DORA considers to be the highest priority in terms of getting us moving forward. It's important for us to give some clear guidance around what an education program needs to look like. And so those rules need to get adopted because people need to go take those courses and be ready to file applications when applications open at the end of December. What I might suggest is that there's a whole set of, when you look at the big picture of regulation, there are violations of the professional acts, right, that could subject a licensee to discipline, for example. No one's even talked about that yet because that's not where we see highest priority because we need to get rules in place to have an understanding of what the educational requirements, what the training requirements, what the what license types. Those are I think the crucial first step, and that's where I think DORA is focusing its energy. Keep in mind, I'm talking just about DORA, but there's an entire other agency that's going to have a set of rules that need to be adopted. And so what I'll suggest is that DOR is also going to be working diligently on capturing all of those recommendations, putting them into a rule set. I do think that they're thinking about probably trying to be more comprehensive as they approach the board, but that is something that I don't have a lot of insight on myself, and so I will leave that to them and not take words out of their mouth. But that will be an entirely different set of rules that you'll have an opportunity to kind of evaluate and comment on. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, so thank you for indulging me in a little bit of time to kind of talk through that. I want to make very clear that you guys have put in a ton of work. We're very appreciative for that, and there is still quite a bit to go. And so, but we are moving and shifting, and we'll be multitasking in a lot of respects. Thanks, Lundy.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Ashley. And with that, I'm going to move to agenda item number 3, which is a chance for us to hear directly from DOR. Dominique, I will hand the baton over to you and Allison to provide your update.
Great. Thank you, Chair Lundy. And it's great to see everyone again. For our public attendees, I'm Dominique Mendiola. I serve as the Senior Director for the Colorado Department of Revenue's Natural Medicine Division, and I'm joined by my colleague, Allison Robinette, who is the Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs. If it's all right with you, Chair Lundy, we're going to have Allison kick us off in this presentation, and then I'll be jumping in as well.
Please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lundy, and thank you, Dominique. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Before we jump into our update, I did want to take a brief moment to join the chorus of praise for the board and congratulate each of the members on the vast amount of work you all have accomplished since April and level of expertise you've developed. I can confidently say that our DOR team has gained a lot from not only observing the board and subcommittees meetings, conversations, but also the opportunities we've had to provide input and feedback in those discussions. The subcommittees have diligently worked through complex issues that often have more than one path forward. So the deliberate and thoughtful nature of the board's collaboration is not only inspiring, but it's also empowering as we look forward to our rulemaking and continued collaboration with the talented DORA staff and our partners at the Department of Public Health. So I wanted to start with that and say thank you all. Sort of how DOR is thinking about this next phase of final recommendations and what we intend to do with those final recommendations. So once the recommendations are finalized after today's meeting, this will give us a chance to closely review every recommendation in detail and importantly, provide opportunities for us to consult with our teams internally who may not have been tracking this work as closely, but what can help us work through the nuances of how we translate recommendations into practice. This will also allow us to better analyze and identify any potential limitations or challenges that we may not have initially considered. In any case, we're sure that this opportunity for an in-depth review of your recommendations will help us craft meaningful written feedback that can help inform the board's ongoing work, and I'm certain we'll identify questions and perspectives we'll want to bring back to these board meetings for further input. When it comes to our review of the recommendations, our goal is to provide you all with written feedback on any recommendations specifically directed to the Department of Revenue or that we may see as relevant to our implementation and in support of this regulatory framework. Of course, we'll also be ready to support and collaborate with our partners at DORA and CDPHE, particularly when it comes to recommendations that include aspects that either touch each of our departments or generally about effective coordination between the agencies involved in this regulatory framework. As we prepare our written feedback, we recognize that some may simply be reiterating points we've raised in the subcommittee meetings before, while we also may have additional considerations that we're raising for the first time. We've appreciated many opportunities to engage directly at the subcommittee meetings, and we see a ton of value in our having had that chance. And so this extra step is really just a way for us to have that sort of written feedback so you all can see how we're approaching what we're thinking about and any outstanding questions we still have. Our written feedback may also, as I mentioned, touch on potential challenges we anticipate encountering, such as implementation-related challenges or insights into potential fiscal considerations that we would need to work through and want to be transparent with the board as we work through those questions. And because we are on the cusp of rulemaking, you're likely to see that we are working through our recommendations simultaneously as we move through our public stakeholder meetings that Ashley was just speaking about. We are going to be developing and discussing draft rule language and hearing a range of proposals that may or may not align with the board's recommendations, but are part of our formal rulemaking process as we evaluate any comments we're receiving. And Dominique's going to touch on that in a few minutes. And so again, just wanted to reiterate, I really appreciate everything you all have done, and I anticipate that we'll provide that written feedback over the next few months in these full board meetings. And along with this work, we'll also begin presenting to you draft rules that, like you've heard, and then the feedback that we're getting on those draft rules. So with that, I'll hand it over to Dopey.
Great, thank you, Allison. And just touching further on the importance of the board's recommendations and how that will inform our next steps. Your final recommendations will really equip us with the details we need to prepare for our agency rulemaking. For example, as we prepare to announce public meetings that are a part of the rulemaking process, your final recommendations will help us determine the types of discussion items we include in our meeting materials. Additionally, as we begin developing actual rule language, your recommendations are going to inform where we begin with our drafting on various subjects. This is recognizing we will also be soliciting input from other stakeholders throughout the process, which will likely include our receiving and considering various other proposals from other parties and throughout our rulemaking. we anticipate referring to the board's recommendations in these public rulemaking meetings. This is going to help us, help others understand the reasons we are bringing certain proposals or certain questions to the table in these public meetings and discussions. This is also, and I know this is, we've touched on this in previous meetings, this is the reason why we see it as really valuable and important for us to have a clear understanding of your intent or the reasoning behind recommendations, particularly as our drafting process evolves, as this is really going to help us track which draft rule proposals remain aligned with the objectives of the board recommendations and where we potentially deviating based on other considerations that we're getting from the rulemaking process. We expect that this will inform the conversations that we're having in future full board meetings and the sort of questions or updates that we're bringing in those meetings with you all. And as it relates to expectations around board consultation throughout this process, the Natural Medicine Code, as we've touched on previously, requires that our agency consult with the board on our rules. As part of that, and a part of that consultation involves our team's engagement in various subcommittee meetings, as you all have seen, and at full board meetings where Allison and I have presented and provided updates where we've had these opportunities. And to build on that, as we are looking forward, we also anticipate more formal presentation of rules to the board as we move through our rulemaking process and have draft rules based on the recommendations and other things that we're hearing from the rulemaking process. So this will also serve as a form of our consultation with the board in the process. And as we, also move forward in this, the updates we are providing in full board meetings like today's are likely to shift with a stronger focus on the substance of proposed rules and other implementation items. An example of that would be, as we begin to develop applications for healing centers, for cultivations, manufacturing facilities, we'll look to full board meetings as an opportunity to bring draft applications and forms to the board for purposes of consultation and feedback before we finalize those. So we see that as a really valuable touch point with you all as we continue in this work beyond just the rulemaking process alone. Allison, do you want to hit on our next steps around listening sessions?
Yeah, as Dominique and I often like to do, we're giving you all a preview into our next round of listening sessions, which we are excited about as we approach our formal rulemaking. So we will be posting this updated schedule on our website either today or early next week. I wanted to share with you all that we have 2 more sessions planned before we shift our focus into the formal rulemaking process. The first listening session will be what we call a catch-all. And it is exactly what it sounds like. We plan to cover topics that we think that there's more to dig into prior to initiating rulemaking, topics that we haven't gotten into yet, and just providing a space for anyone who's interested in the regulatory framework to share comments on what we've covered, what we haven't covered, and their thoughts on what this should look like. This session will be on Friday, February 23rd from 9 a.m. to noon. And we're allotting 3 hours for this because we do want plenty of time to hear from anyone who wishes to share their perspective or insights. With our second session, we're going to really look up this informal information gathering phase of our implementation work. And if you recall back to the July board meeting, we talked about how we were going to spend the rest of 2023 and beginning of 2024 really just gathering as much information as we could. So our session that will be on Monday, March 4th from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. is really going to be sort of the bookend on this informal information gathering process. And we are going to be talking through what the Department of Revenue National Medicine Division is charged with in rulemaking, our priorities for the formal rulemaking, and as well as how we as an agency approach the rulemaking, including our guiding principles and an overall overview of the formal requirements that are included. So this includes Administrative Procedure Act requirements. Really will just be sort of that nice bookend to say, this is everything we've learned, and this is how we're going to work through that in the formal rulemaking process. At the end of March, we plan to hold our first formal rulemaking stakeholder meetings. And we currently plan to have our public meetings between the end of March and the end of July, all culminating in a permanent rulemaking hearing before August. So we'll be sharing more plans about our formal rulemaking at the next board meeting.
Great, thank you, Allison. And just to wrap us up here, I want to reiterate Allison's and others' remarks about the work of the board and express how much we appreciate your contributions to this process. The collaboration and dedication you all have demonstrated as you've worked through such a wide range of really complex issues is something to be proud of. And we look forward to the board finalizing its recommendations to inform our continued work in this process. And just as we conclude, want to remind folks listening in to please visit our website at the Department of Revenue's Natural Medicine Division for more information, where we will be publishing updates. Everything is available there based on the meetings that we've held, the sessions that we've held so far. And please, there's also an opportunity for folks to subscribe. For those who have not yet, we would encourage folks to subscribe to receive updates if folks have not from our division. So thank you all so much for the time, and look forward to continuing our work together in this next phase.
Dominique and Allison, thank you as well. Have absolutely loved your presence at subcommittee and full board meetings and the collaboration that we get to have with you all. So with that being said, I want to open up if any board members have any questions for Dominique or Allison. Seeing none, thank you both so much. Moving on to agenda item number 4, which is the approval of annual designation. I'm going to hand it off to Ms. Mueller with the AG's office to be able to carry this agenda item for us. Ashley?
Thank you, Lundy. I'm having a difficult time getting off mute. So legally, Colorado law requires that every board make a designation every year as to where they're going to hold their board meetings and where they're going to notice them. So this is a formality of sorts, but I do want to just kind of introduce the topic by saying that it is a requirement that we adopt a location for where to designate your meeting notices to be posted. DORA boards routinely designate the DORA Welcome Center, which is the physical address for DORA. In the before times when we had a where we met physically at 1560 Broadway. Secondarily, the board DORA also designates on websites in an online calendar at the DPO website. And so what we need to do is we just need to have a motion to adopt those locations as the places that members of the public can identify where and when your meetings will occur.
Would you like me to make that motion, Ashley?
Yeah,
Got it.
either you or someone else should make the motion.
So moved. Well done.
I will second.
Okay, thanks.
Or grab on it.
You can choose.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Back to you, Lundy.
Wonderful. We're going to move on to agenda number 5, and I will acknowledge that after we complete this agenda item, we will take a brief break. So agenda item number 5 is the approval of amended bylaws, and I will hand it back to you, Ashley, to guide us through this agenda item.
Thank you. I didn't even bother putting myself on mute. So as you recall, this board adopted bylaws. It's been, they have been amended once already, but we thought that it might be worthwhile now that we are at this pivot point moment to consider further amendment to the bylaws. So essentially, you guys have, as I think Mr. Barami has noted and Ms. Broughton have noted, you've you've participated in over 70 meetings over the 8 months of 2023, which is extraordinary. And as we think about closing up these first set of recommendations, and we think about how to best and most efficiently utilize this board's time, we think that at least in the coming few months, there's probably not a need to have subcommittees meet monthly as they have been meeting. I think there will be a moment where we need to revisit those subcommittees down the road, but under the current bylaws as they exist, there's a requirement to have monthly subcommittee meetings. So essentially, we would like to recognize in the bylaws and adopt amendments to the bylaws to reflect that, at least in this time, we don't see a need for monthly regular subcommittees. So the revisions that I'm proposing in the document that should be in front of you, and Amanda, if you're the one controlling, if you would start scrolling through that, that would be awesome. Thank you. The amendments that I'm proposing are intended to recognize that the subcommittees have done the bulk of their initial work, that you are going to recommend out your first set of consolidated recommendations during this meeting, and that after this month, we can essentially suspend subcommittee meetings for the next, I'd say, 2 to 3 months, if not 4. And this board can continue to do its work in the full board context as we start to kind of talk through those draft rules as I described earlier. So what I have done is make changes. If you'll hang right there at 6.2, in 6.2, I've made a recommendation that following your initial recommendations adopted this month, the subcommittees still exist, but shall meet only as often as necessary to conduct their business. Definitely striking that, but no less than once a month, to reflect and recognize that we're going to transition, at least in the near term, to kind of the full body of the board. And that meetings will be set with Ms. Bratton and either Lundy, you, or a subcommittee chair if there is a need to recall a subcommittee to address a particular point. So you'll see as we scroll through there was a typographical error where there was 2 paragraphs that were identified as 6.2. So the remainder of the revision in that section 6 is to accommodate for renumbering. And then once we get into Article 7, that's where we really kind of lay out the meat of the subcommittees. And so 7.2 is the location where subcommittees were identified. And we essentially drilled down to what the subcommittees were and what they should address. We're not changing really any of that, but that prefatory language, if you could scroll back up to 7.2, that prefatory language, the board established the following subcommittees to develop the initial recommendations. Just to recognize that now that we've moved through those, and now if you'll scroll through to the bottom of 7.2, I propose that we add a little bit of additional language that basically reflects that following the submission of your initial recommendations in this month at this meeting, these subcommittees have concluded their preliminary work, right? So we no longer need them to meet on a monthly basis, but instead we recognize there may be ad hoc need to recall a subcommittee and ask them to address gaps in the recommendations or to address new considerations in the second round of subcommittees. So if that is necessary, we want to reflect the bylaw language that Ms. Bratton will collaborate with Lundy or subcommittee chairs to kind of make that happen and schedule as needed. The only other thing, if we can scroll to 7.3, I think that's the only other thing, is language right there in the first sentence that I added. You actually adopted this revision as in the last version of amendment. It never got incorporated into the signed bylaws at that point. So I've put it back in for us to at least acknowledge and recognize that it was a wordsmithing change that got made, but just didn't get incorporated in the last version. So I thought it would be most transparent and most appropriate to just put that red line in for us to include it in our vote this time around. So that's it. The real underlying message is in the next few months, we think it's meaningful and important for this board to meet as a full group to talk about draft rules that Dora will be bringing. And so there may be a need to refer to subcommittees, but in this kind of as we anticipate it, we don't want to ask you to commit to subcommittees when we're not sure that we think that it's necessary to have the subcommittees meet, at least for this near term. I see Dr. Sisley's hand.
Oh, I really appreciate you laying all this out, and I was gonna just move to approve the amended bylaws if I'm not out of order.
No, that's absolutely fine, Dr. Sisley. I'm happy to take it that way. What I'll do is I'll call for a second, and then we'll ask for any discussion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
Dr. Estés raised her hand.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Dr. E.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you. Good to see you.
You too.
Thank you. I'm going to say that our subcommittee probably will be asking for another meeting. We're in the midst of we're in the midst of something that needs further thought and clarification and input. We think that our subcommittee, unlike other subcommittees, has a unique challenge to it. And that is that much of what we're covering is terra incognita. It is a land that has not been mapped before. Meaning the inclusion of people who have traditionally been eliminated, erased, not given a consult or collaboration. We made a statement of Skippy Upton-Mesirow, myself made a statement today that we gave to Mr. Brolamy that I think all of you hopefully have seen and read about how our subcommittee is using a way through that is different than usual. Let me put it that way. It's time, certainly, for us to do what we are doing in our subcommittee. It's way past time, probably, one way. So, given all that you've put together here, which is such an immense amount of work, I am just flabbergasted at the work that everyone brings to this. It firstly is like having two jobs, not just one, but one is certainly to bring the content as per the patterns and requirements that you're under. And the other is to help us move forward in ways that are meaningful and useful, not just, putting boundaries around things, which is very important, but also in ways that actually carry longevity and meaning for the future of all of plant medicine in our state. So just to say that my committee that I'm chair of is Mr. Ricardo Baca, Dr. Tina Gonzales, Dr. Sofia Chavez, Skippy Upton-Mesirow, and myself. Then we will very likely be asking for another meeting and hope that it will accommodate us in that so that we can not stop in midstream, so to speak. Thank you for listening to me.
Absolutely, Dr. E. Thank you for your comment. I think you're right. Your subcommittee has a different kind of focus and target than some of the other subcommittees, and I agree. I think there are going to be areas of opportunity where the subcommittees will need to get back together to address certain things. One of the beautiful things and what we were trying to do in this amendment was to give a little bit of latitude and grace to the board to be able to actually recall subcommittees with regularity if necessary, but not with a routine cadence. And so as the bylaws were drafted, it would require all the subcommittees to meet every month. And we wanted to find some flexibility for you so that this is not going to preclude subcommittees from getting scheduled. And that was the purpose of leaving all of the subcommittee information in the bylaws so that when there is absolutely a need, it is easy and very straightforward and very simple to schedule, but would not bind the subcommittees to have to meet every month.
Understand. Thank you for that. I think
Yes. Yeah.
Just going by our last subcommittee meeting, people stayed 2 extra hours. What I wanted to do is I want to laud the people who are on the board that are now in also the subcommittees. Unquestionably and irrevocably, undeniably, every single person on this board has given way more, I think, than they initially have ever imagined. And in our last subcommittee, people stayed 2 extra hours in order to make an effort to more closely shape our recommendations. They didn't have to. I could have said, well, we'll just leave it as it is. We'll just say it's preliminary. And so, but they really worked hard. And that is the oddity, I think, of our board members. They do a yeoman's work on the committed to doing the very best they can. So thank you for all that you've done too, Councilor Muller. I know the rest of the Attorney General's assistant Attorney General's offices. That's all I really have to say is that every board meeting and but particularly every subcommittee meeting I've been at, which I've been to many that I'm not even a voting member of, I've lived a long time and roll into my 79th year in a couple of days here. And I have really not seen for the dedication of people who are here, all from DORA, from DOR, from Attorney General's office, from admin, from directors, from board members, from I have never seen so many people together in one place give 120% to everything they do. And I have to say, I think it's beautiful. It really is. beautiful. I don't have a bigger word than that, but it's very beautiful. So thank you for
Thank you, Dr. E. That was actually how I was kind of thinking about it too. This has been a beautiful expression of a lot of people who are giving a lot of themselves to help make this happen. So thank you for acknowledging and recognizing that. I want to, and that's part of what's driving, quite frankly, our desire to make sure that we make this as manageable for people as possible. We don't want to see our board members burn out. We want to give everyone a little bit of respite where we can, and so certainly that was part of what drove this suggestion and kind of why we put pen to paper to bring this. So, does anyone else have any questions around the amendment to the bylaws? Or does anyone have anything else they want to comment on? Okay. Hearing none, I will call for the motion that has been seconded and is on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Thank you all very much. Motion carries. And at least for the near term, we will relieve you of subcommittee meetings, but I'm sure they'll come back. And as Dr. E reflected, there may be opportunities for engagement. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bowler. Having completed agenda item number 5, the board will now take a short break, and let's return at 2:10 p.m. Please ensure that all cameras are turned off during the break and everyone is muted. This meeting will resume at 2:10. This is Chairperson Lundy. It is 2:10 p.m. Are we ready to all jump back in? All right, seeing some more faces on the screen. Fantastic. Finishing a bite of chip. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 6. Subcommittee updates. So my request today is for subcommittee chairs and spokespeople to provide a high-level overview of subcommittee updates since our last full board meeting. As a reminder, our goal for today's meeting overall is to approve version 10 of our recommendations as presented in light of the massive amount of work subcommittees have done for the past year, over hundreds of hours, as well as the opportunity for the full board will have to provide feedback at February and March full board meetings. So with that being said, I'm gonna first move to emergency response, safety and ethics. The subcommittee chair, Dr. Connor, isn't with us today, so Dr. Hannum has graciously offered to provide the update for this subcommittee. So Dr. Hannum, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Lundy. Just a correction there. So the chair is Mr. Dunn, but Mr. Dunn was in attendance at the last meeting.
Which I deeply apologize for.
No worries. So There were a few changes to the consolidated recommendations that were made in our last subcommittee meeting that I just want to highlight. Not very many. We did add some additional recommendations, mostly around the consumption of natural medicine, where that should occur and how that could be adulterated in different ways or not. So recommendations around that, that's in our packet of consolidated recommendations. So there's several of those. We also made a recommendation that there should be some kind of screening requirement for participants, and included some recommendations of what should be a part of that screening requirement. We made a recommendation to approve that the state consider the approval of authorized locations other than healing centers, and that's based on a lot of work that Dr. Connor has done to outline what that might look like and how we might define those. So we did make the recommendation that the state should consider approval of that. And then we did recommend to adopt the ethical code, which has been seen by a lot of subcommittees and has been in this full board meeting before. There was one minor change to that ethical code, and that was more for clarity than anything else. And so that's highlighted in the packet. Open to any questions, or if anyone else from the subcommittee has things to add, that would be lovely.
Thank you, Dr. Hannum. Any questions or comments? Yeah, Skippy.
Chair Lundy, first just a clarification, because you did mention feedback in February and March meetings. So what degree of feedback do you want now in this, like just process wise, versus at those future meetings?
Yeah, I would like for us to focus the bulk of feedback at those future meetings. I think if something feels very glaring or adamant, that we can state it today. But again, our goal is to adopt this version 10 so that we can translate them to rules, get feedback, and then as a board really dig in at those next full board meetings in a more detailed manner.
Okay. That's super helpful. Thank you. I need 90 seconds to collect my thoughts, so hopefully someone else has something to say.
Sounds good. Thank you, Skippy. While Skippy gathers his thoughts, any other comments or questions? And Will, thank you for chairing the subcommittee.
I certainly appreciate Dr. Hannum and some of my other committee members picking up the slack. It was just a bad timing for December and January.
Heard. Thank you for the work you do in the world.
You were very kind, Chair. Thank you.
Skippy, was that 90 seconds enough for what you would like to share?
No. But if we're
I can apologize again, Skippy, if that was.
I don't think the first one wasn't necessary, or the second. Let's be honest, that was two. I can try and do it on the fly, and not plot anything that feels like small, but things that maybe are worthy of discussion. So the first thing to raise is the facilitator group numbers. I believe it is 4 per facilitator up to 64, which would mean a group of 64 could be seen by 16 facilitators. Not my realm of expertise. I have more experiential knowledge as a participant than anything, but I continue to have concerns about that number and if it's the right number and if it meets both the necessity of oversight and safety, but also our goals around cost, etc. And so I guess that would be one critical point to talk through, or just have the group share more. I'm sure you guys have spent a lot of time on this.
Dr. Hannum and subcommittee, I'll let you answer the questions without me passing the baton. So feel free to respond.
Yeah, so we have spent quite a bit of time on this topic, and honestly, that number we came to with a lot of input from non-voting participants who have experience acting as facilitators. I want to say again that this isn't the final draft, but that's the number we came to as a subcommittee based on feedback we were getting from individuals that have experience facilitating.
Cool.
Those are definitely the voices that I would lean on. So I really appreciated that background. I'll let anyone else jump in if they want, but that makes sense to me, and I appreciate that.
Dr. Chavez, I see your hand up.
I just wanted to share that my years of helping, and that's the term that's used when I've been part of groups, is that a facilitator takes on no more than 5 individuals, and there may be other facilitators in that space, and the group may be larger, say 20, 30 people, but a facilitator in my experience in the indigenous ceremonies that I have been part of are no more than 5 for facilitator, just for safety and to be able to handle anything if an individual needs extra care. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chavez. Dr. Sisley?
Yeah, I want to ask you guys, this might probably for Dr. Hannum, did you guys discuss the, under the ethical code about adding the notion that people with a personal relationship would not be allowed to participate, that you were trying to ban that dynamic, that personal relationships are not allowed in facility?
That is in the ethical code. The question is finding it in a timely way. I don't know if maybe we can search the doc. I mean,
Yeah, I remember reviewing it yesterday under E Edward number 7. Talks about. I have some concerns about that, and I don't know if this is the right place to talk about it here, but I was hoping we could just strike that.
E7, it reads as a facilitator shall not offer or render natural medicine services as a means of establishing a personal relationship with participants. As a means of establishing a relationship with establishing a personal relationship.
I guess I was worried that we were banning people that know each other previously.
Or I think that goes into number 12.
Okay.
On the document.
I just want to discuss that language because I don't agree with that. I think people, this is a small, psychedelics community is pretty small and people will know each other, and I don't want to restrict, I don't want people who have past romantic relationships or however you want to call that, they should be excluded, but I don't see why a personal relationship should be excluded as long as they're adhering to all the other ethical boundaries.
If I may, real quick and read it out loud. So I think you're referencing number 12 specifically. A facilitator shall not engage in the facilitation of natural medicine with someone who they have already have a romantic, sexual, or personal relationship, or with someone who is related to someone who they already have a romantic, sexual, or personal relationship with.
Yeah, I think the rest of it is fine. I just object to personal relationship being in there.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sisley. Sam, how do we want to handle, in light of this being the version as provided, how do we want to handle that kind of adjustment?
I might defer to Ashley or Lori on this process, but really quickly, I think it's important to hear from Skippy and Sofia real quick.
Absolutely. Yep.
Dominique.
Skippy, feel free to go next, and I'll go through the lines of hands.
Yeah, I'm so glad that Dr. Sisley pointed to that, because that's kind of what I was trying to make sense of. Is I have a number of notes between E4 and E12 of differing specifics. It would be too messy, I think, to get into here. But if I'm trying to consolidate my thoughts, I think a number of those points are in conflict with traditional means of using medicines and training too, like whether that's apprenticeship models that we've talked about as part of the accelerated path. Some of those seem to be in contradiction, whether it is family lineages or traditions, where we teach and practice together to even, modern Western practitioners who use sacred medicines as part of their own healing journey with their spouses who they also practice with or also facilitate with. I've seen that in a number of cases with names we would all recognize and it working very well. And so I guess to try to sum it up, I think there's a number of these things that come from a more legalistic Western tradition, but we are moving into an integration of a more relational orientation in addition to that. And I have concerns with a number of these aligning with those intentions and the reality of the space. And so if there's, some way to capture that that's part of the ongoing work we're going to be doing, I think that's great. And I'll also just caveat by saying some of my concerns are not directly for now. If we're talking about just the psilocybin mushroom, it doesn't really apply. But as we look forward to, ayahuasca use or other types of use that are group format that have different types of traditional facilitation, where sometimes the sacrament is ingested as part of the experience by the facilitator. Those are known future problems or not now problems, but I'm also putting on my legislator hat and seeing a number of areas where the message that wasn't necessarily intended to be sent is received, that multiple medicines at the same time are dangerous. Ingesting medicine while facilitating is a problem. And I don't want to plant that seed knowing that in the future we might be looking at, studies around addiction cessation and saying, well, actually it's iboga and 5-MeO at the end that is going to be most efficacious. But now we've told people mixing things is bad. So there's a lot in that. I'm sorry, it's complicated, but I do have some concerns about this kind of grouping of pieces in here.
Thank you, Skippy. I appreciate your thoughts. Dr. Chavez.
Yes, I wanted to share, I completely agree with what both Dr. Sisley and Skippy just said, and this will be an issue, and it is in conflict with the Indigenous community and the communities of color with how medicine is offered and ceremony is offered. So this is going to be an issue. I don't even think, like sometimes you might say this could be an issue. This is going to be an issue because we're all related and we're all family. So this can create issues in the future, or will create. That's just me.
Understood. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge that the queer community within the psychedelic world is a small one, and many can often prefer to work with each other. So I also experience that in my world as well. Dr. Estés.
Thank you, Chair. I think this can be worked out. We're not going to be a monolithic structure. We're going to have, as we spoke about at the very beginning, spheres of practice. And I believe that Dr. Sisley and Skippy, Dr. Chavez have very salient points about relationship, as do you, Lundy, that pre-exists amongst people. The only thing I would add to that is, and I believe that we can make a sphere that those ways of doing things in the old traditional manner continue, or in the new traditional manner yet to be. But also, some people with licenses are barred from having dual relationships. When I was chair of the Colorado State Grievance Board for 13 years, we saw it constantly, where people tried to barter, who were, say, social workers, licensed psychologists, licensed marriage and family counselor, or were they on too close, you might say, of a relationship with a patient that began to interfere with what we would call transference and countertransference, which are very real issues in psychotherapy. So I think in terms of trying to care about as many people as we can, and we cannot, make law. That's our main, how would you say? I mean, I wish I had a magic wand. I don't know about law, but I wish I had a magic wand that I could wave and everything would be good for all people. However, we will do the best we can. I think that this can be solved so that people are protected who are licensed, unless they want to change their ethical structure that they receive, not just from their license, but also from their professional group, like the APA for psychologists, for instance, and also have respect for the relational quality of other groups who move in the world in a different way. So just my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Estés. Dr. Sisley, please.
I was going to ask Chair if the board would be open. I'm just trying to think through how do we fix this, because I feel like there's other elements of the ethical code that are, I mean, all of it is so crucial, but I think it is probably overly restrictive in some ways, not just the issue of the wording personal relationship, but I saw other things that I felt really deserved a lot more debate. And I'm just wondering, is there any possibility of just pulling out the ethical code from the regs temporarily so that we can really do a deeper dive into defining what is personal relationship, what is, the issues of teachers facilitating students and practical. I just feel like there's so many different challenges here, and would it be possible? I feel like the ethical code is going to continue to evolve over the next year as we figure this out, and maybe it shouldn't be codified in regulation because this is such a new industry. They need to develop their own code maybe independently. I don't know. I realize that this is so paramount that we probably do need to vote on it today, but I worry that there's things that still need to be fixed. No.
Absolutely. Yeah, heard Dr. Sisley. And I'm also aware that if people have other licenses, like Dr. Estes already mentioned, it doesn't preclude them from abiding by those licensure requirements as well. So I saw Ashley's hand go up. I'm going to defer to the AG to give us some guidance.
Thanks. Thank you. I hear what everyone's saying, and I want to see if we can find a middle ground. My suggestion is that we go ahead and we adopt the recommendations, but perhaps there is an area of opportunity for us, and I was trying to wordsmith this sentence, that basically says something like, the board acknowledges that the ethical principles articulated herein are somewhat inconsistent with certain underrepresented communities and indigenous and spiritual or cultural communities, and that the regulating agency should consider the impact, right? I think it should consider the impact that this ethical code has on certain communities that may seek these services, right? Or that will are anticipated to seek these services under the regulated program. So I think we could maybe think about something like that.
Dr. Sisley, I would love to let you respond before I do.
I'm trying to think if can I ask Ashley, are you definitely don't think it should be removed? Because I feel like that would be the best way to really dig into this later. But
let me just respond to that question. I think that it is important to kind of move that ethical code through and to have that as part of this set of recommendations. So I wouldn't suggest pulling the full ethical code out, first of all. Second of all, I think that as Dr. E pointed out, dual licensees are going to be bound by certain expectations of their other license. And that is something that I think we have to acknowledge and recognize. I agree that there's probably some space where it can be recognized that perhaps personal relationship is a little too ambiguous. And so if you're going to delete any portion of it, that might be the portion that I would suggest. I don't know that necessarily fixes the problem though, right? Yes. Because part of the concern is about perhaps family members in Indigenous communities engaging as a facilitator for their family member. And that is something that in kind of a more traditional environment would not be appropriate. And so I think there has to be, I don't think you can cut completely out of the ethical code that concept, because then you find yourself at odds with the licensing requirements of other programs. But I do think that it's fair to acknowledge that there may be communities, especially traditionally underrepresented communities, where that's going to be challenged. And we shouldn't discourage personal relationships, although romantic partners may not be the most appropriate. So maybe, right, just something to think about.
Chair, I just want to say, based on her justification, that I support the addition of that language she offered earlier.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sisley. Will.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate Dr. Sisley's comments as well. As mostly the chair of this subcommittee, I can tell you that I don't think we spent more time. I think we spent more time on the ethical considerations than perhaps everything else combined. We were thoughtful, we were deliberate. I also know that I don't think we were going to, I think there's enough right that I think that it's worth including. So I appreciate your support in passing this. Also, this is draft recommendations. My understanding, and Ms. Marami or council could probably also comment on this, is that I don't think this is the final thing. My other estimate is I think that somebody else is going to read this and find something else that we might have to go back and perhaps wordsmith or change. So I just wanted to make sure that I was speaking in support of my fellow subcommittee and Dr. Connor in particular, who put so much time into this, that I think we did the best that we could with the time that we had, and and I don't think that even without any language, I don't think there's any harm necessarily pushing this forward as the first draft of recommendations, knowing we may have some work, particularly with your professional insight. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that we will have a chance as a board to provide feedback at both February and March's full board meeting as well. So this doesn't codify our last opportunity to create these kinds of edits. I'm going to defer real quick. Ashley, do you have something else you would like to say? I see your hand. Okay. And then I also see Sam's hand, so I'm going to let him speak real quick, and then I'll come back to you, Dr. Sisley and Skippy. Sam, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate what Councilor Moeller said, and I don't think the entirety of the ethical code, which the subcommittee has worked on and has been given to other subcommittees in the board multiple times, should be completely taken out. So,
okay, thank you, Sam. Skippy, please.
Yes, thank you. First, I just want to echo, Will, what you said. There's so much work that went into this. Dr. Connor's not here, but I can't imagine the number of days and how much went into this. This is huge, and I just really want to honor and thank you. I feel somewhat lucky that I didn't have to put in all those hours, so I know that this is a lot. And I absolutely think that the ethical code needs to move forward in some way. It's a critical leg of this three-legged stool, probably has like 10 legs. But so I totally agree with that. I don't advocate for pulling it out. That said, I think there is this sort of subsection of questions that I see as being particularly problematic. Not that they're wrong, but just that there's really fruitful opportunity for improvement. I'm looking at it, and to me, it's characterized by the subsection of points under E between 4 and 13 that just deal with relationality of facilitation. And I appreciate your comments, Ashley, about this might be for a subsection of people or groups. I don't think that's the case. And this is now me stepping into Skippy's opinion, so I'll really help with the other end of the parentheses here. But, I would argue that a lot of the mental health challenges in our communities stem unintentionally from the breakdown of relationality and relationships and family. Those weren't the intended outcomes. There's a whole dissertation I could give on this, but I think that's it. And so I don't think this is just something for Indigenous communities to be concerned about. I think we should be looking at this as an opportunity to be learning from those practices that were kept in those communities, but reintegrating them into, general society, so to speak, for the benefit of everybody. That's going to take time to look at. So my suggestion, and just kind of like, how can we move this forward and also acknowledge that, knowing that there's going to be a lot more meetings to do that, would be something like, and now these are suggestions, I'm out of my opinion, take it what you will, but perhaps there is a kind of a isolating of those 4 to 13, and recognizing as a bullet that any facilitator who has an additional license of any kind, that the ethical code or requirements of that license supersede this, so that we're saying in clear form that all of those people are doing as they're supposed to, they're protected, there's no risk to them or their license. And then secondly, putting a note, and that could go in one of these kind of reasoning things that we've been adding to stuff, that says something like that, something like the board seeks improvement to these numbers, 4 to 13, to improve relational dynamics with learnings from Indigenous culture that will be updated over time or over the next few months. Something like that, just so that they recognize, hey, these are good. We're putting them in there. We're voting on them, but we know they're not perfect and we want to integrate. And so expect some more changes around these things, something like that.
Thank you, Skippy. Yeah, a super important consideration of mine is the facilitator license that doesn't have other professional licenses, and that we are being thoughtful from both a professional and cultural standpoint with how we write these recommendations. So much appreciated. One brief question I had for this subcommittee is, I sent an empirical study specifically around group therapy and cost equity. And I didn't see this, so I just wanted to ask if there is an allowance for remote supervision within a group therapy context, or how the subcommittee has approached that conversation.
Chair Lundy, can I ask you to rephrase that? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, so within the empirical study, there was remote supervision from the medical professional while the facilitators themselves were on site, as a bridge as well from both an equity as well as a maintaining of safety, but just eliminating the need for numerous professionals to be physically on site, which could significantly affect the cost.
I do think that we have discussed this, and there is nothing precluding remote monitoring in what we've submitted. And I'll defer to Sam too.
Yep, Sam.
Yeah, there's nothing in here that prohibits it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we've already covered a good amount of complex ground. So I wanted to just briefly open the floor for any more questions or comments to this subcommittee before we move to the next one. Okay, seeing none, thanks so much for that update, Dr. Hannum. Really appreciate it. And for the robust discussion. Our next subcommittee that we're going to hear from is Public Health and Equity. I want to personally thank Subcommittee Chair Billy Wynne and the full subcommittee for the full 4 hours of me getting to share 17 recommendations last meeting to propose for the Equity Subcommittee. So I will hand it off to you, Billy, to provide that update, and just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lundy. And for those who weren't there, it was a sight to behold. Chair Lundy facilitated very robust discussion and, virtually unanimous adoption of many very, very positive and important recommendations that speak to improving the equity of this program, both in terms of those who can participate in the program and administering the services and presiding over the businesses, et cetera, but also for those who might take advantage of receiving the medicine and the related facilitation services. So I'll just say that what you have in front of you right now are the recommendations that were adopted before the meeting we had last week, in January's meeting. And so you all have seen these before, including at the last full board meeting. So I'm not going to read through them. I will just give you some of kind of the highlights and gist of the recommendations that were adopted at last week's meeting, and then would certainly welcome questions on any of the recommendations, whether they were, you've seen them before or not. And definitely would invite Chair Lundy or anyone else from the subcommittee to add their own, input, color, and information that they want to add to my brief summary of these recommendations. So again, just sort of in short and without reading through each one, I would say that there's a couple of different ways that at least my mind buckets these recommendations that were made. Some of them speak to kind of social equity for license holders, a social equity designation. We talked about adding, or we adopted recommendations addressing grants and loan programs, mentor programs, and basically other benefits for those who might qualify for social equity support. We had great input from the folks in the cannabis program, which has a social equity model that we tried to adopt some lessons learned from what has worked for them and what has not worked for them. And as they readily noted, those programs have been kind of in development and in evolution for many, many years. So we don't expect to sort of, I'm just speaking for myself, this comment, stick the landing on day one with these programs where they might get adopted and implemented. But we certainly believe in the direction, of the sentiment embodied in these recommendations, and, are encouraging the agencies to get working on them and implementing them as soon as they can, as best as they can. With those and with other recommendations, we tried to be careful not to ask agencies to do things that are impossible or that there's no money for. So where relevant, we tried to flag that, we did not want, for example, the implementation of some programs to increase licensing fees, across the board. And we did acknowledge, and I think make a recommendation. Yes, we did. And let me see if I can find the language so I don't mess it up, around the development of a new funding stream through a natural medicine sales charge. That's the very last recommendation on this consolidated list. So in that fund, if it were ever adopted and implemented, which we recommend that it is, would be used to defray the costs of some of these other new programs that we recommended that do cost some money, but that we did not want to increase the licensing fees that are collected. We did have one recommendation that would increase licensing fees for some, and that was to create some variability in the licensing fees that are charged based on the nature of the license and sort of the income or wealth, or we weren't too particular in defining it of the license applicant. So that one would create variability in licensing fees, but it wouldn't increase the gross licensing fees that are collected. Let me see if I'm going to hit any other kind of buckets here. We also spoke on a very broad category, things like believing that facilitators should be able to operate independently of healing centers. We had talked about the need for facilitators to be able to procure natural medicine from cultivators independently of healing centers for, with that overarching principle in mind that they need to be able to operate independently. But we adopted this additional recommendation so that the agencies are clear that it is at least the subcommittee's preference that whatever obstacles there may be to facilitators operating independently from healing centers, that those get addressed in the implementation of all these regulations. In that bucket is that I was originally going to characterize as issues that we understand other subcommittees have taken up, and so it's probably clear to some of you who are active on those other subcommittees that we felt free to weigh in on some of the work that you're doing, coming from the spirit of, fostering equity. And I believe that in at least most, if not all, of the cases that where I've been, noted it and been aware of it, I think our recommendations seem to be aligned with the direction that those, corresponding subcommittees are taking with these issues. So certainly pleased to see that. Why don't I just stop there? I see Sam has this hand raised, and definitely want to encourage other subcommittee members to add their take on this.
Sorry, Billy, this isn't related to the overview. I just want to remind everyone who is attending from the public that you are not allowed to chat board members, and for board members not to chat back. That is breaking our policies regarding our board meetings. So please do not continue to chat or raise your hand. We will have stakeholder meetings coming up, public stakeholder meetings. And I do encourage you to email us. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move to questions, as the person who authored a significant amount of these, I just want to bring up 2 brief points. Billy said it in such a salient way. So just to support what Billy already shared, I really considered timing within these recommendations, acknowledging that what we can do in the first year will be different than future years. However, I think it's essential that we share a longer arc of our vision of equity, which leads to my second point of, I am aware that the cost inequity or the lack of affordability of this industry is a significant concern, both for facilitators as well as participants that will ultimately be within this space. And that was a centering concern of mine, and guided the spirit behind how we can really think through this. That I do believe as a state that not only we can, but we will center equity in how we uphold this space, and that creating as much affordability as possible while upholding professional standards is possible. That those aren't mutually exclusive ideas. So just want to reiterate our commitment to these principles of equity. With that, Dr. Chavez.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank this subcommittee because when I read the living soil disposal, it made me emotional because, I know I brought it up in a couple of meetings, but it was very thoughtful and mindful of the subcommittee because in many traditions, the mushroom is very sacred. It's a master plant, it's a teaching plant, and you just don't dispose of it, throwing it out in the trash. And so I just want to say that inclusion of living soil disposal meant a lot to me, and I'm sure it's going to mean a lot to a lot of people who are concerned about Donansin, which is Mother Earth, and taking care of the plants. So Thank you very much, subcommittee.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chavez. You were in my heart when I was drafting that recommendation. Really appreciate it. Skippy.
Yeah. First, before I jump into the note, public service announcement from Sam, just to anyone listening you can't chat, I just wanted a line of why that is. We follow open meetings laws, and that is so that there can be trust in this process. It's important that we both get the policy as best we can, but also that people understand how we got here. And though I'm sure chats are just intended as informative, etc., it could be seen as sort of backroom talking where everyone can't see it. And so we really strive to create an environment where you get to weigh in, but for everybody to hear so that we can really consider it and use it. So I just want to be clear if you're listening, that's why. And there are channels to have your voice heard by the entire board, and we very much welcome that. Second thing is, Chair Lundy, wow. Like from the first time I got your giant spreadsheet of ideas, I was like, this is so amazing. It really is. I just don't almost ever see creativity and care like that in the public space. And it was so obvious that you had been thinking about this deeply for a very long time. And to see that so well received and included by this subcommittee, and to see the other subcommittees view those suggestions as opportunities for growth and improvement and not a threat to their territory, which can happen, is just amazing. This is how we're supposed to do this. And I just want to say thank you to you personally and to your subcommittee and to everyone else for working in the fashion that you have. I think it's just beautiful, and I'm just really honored to be part of it. That said, I have three small, I swear they're small, and I'll shut up because I'm on all the other subcommittees after this notes. The first one is just a note for staff in language. I noticed the language of spheres coming up here. It comes up in a handful of places because we talked about that. But in the licenses, we've kind of lost the language of spheres. And so I just think it would be good for staff to go back and find some continuity around that. Because if we want to use that word, we should use it everywhere. And if we're not going to use it, then we have some dangling modifiers that aren't going to make sense. So I would just ask staff to pay attention to that. And then the substantive suggestions are in number 4, the business loan program. As I read this, it is a loan for facilitators so people can get their facilitator license. I would suggest this would also be great for people who want to start healing centers, especially in underrepresented communities where there's going to be a care desert. So if there's openness to adding that into the language, I think that would be my first suggestion. And then I have one more small suggestion as well, but I'll pause there.
Yeah, just as a point of clarification for DOR's space, we did include that DOR would make similar recommendations for the licenses that they oversee. And the reason that it was focused on facilitators is because those are the licenses that we are specifically tasked within DOR to focus on. So it doesn't preclude the similar kind of program. It actually encourages DOR to follow in step with our recommendations.
Beautiful. Okay, that's great. And then my last thought is on number 9, the natural medicine sales charge. Without reading this all, it lists a number of potential uses, and I think it's important that we add a potential use, which is data and observational study. That's a piece that the data subcommittee is going to be working on for a while to look at what is that, but it's almost certainly we're going to require funding of some kind. So I would just suggest that we add that into the language so that it's at least that door is open to that use.
Thank you, Skip.
No.
Billy, did you have anything you wanted to add as chair?
No, I appreciate those recommendations. I don't know if I don't kind of know if how we respond to something. I mean, are we gonna consider amendments to these recommendations now, or maybe in the next couple of months as we're finalizing the actual regulations? Maybe it's best to kind of bring in comments like Skippy's covered suggestions as we dig in there. So it's kind of a question for you or the program lead, or Ashley, or
Yeah, I'll give Ashley a chance to first respond, and then I can follow up if needed.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, I keep bouncing back and forth because my eyes aren't good enough to read that small print on my screen. My suggestion is that if you have substantive changes that you want to make into this document, you should probably, if the full entirety of the board is in agreement with that, I might suggest making that change here and now. And part of the reason that that I say that with respect to this subparagraph 9 consideration is that is not something that's going to end up in the rules because there's no statutory authority for that right now. So this is a recommendation to pursue that. And so as Mr. Wynne kind of reflects, yes, you're going to get a chance to look at the rules, but that's going to be kind of an action item for another day, and won't actually show up in those draft rules. So if it's meaningful and important for you to include another authorized use for that type of collection, then my suggestion might be to include it here now.
Okay. Then I will just briefly open the floor to see if anybody's opposed to adding Skippy's addition of data within number 9 of the sales charge recommendation that is for future years. Dr. Estés, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think for now, adding is a good idea because this is not a final document. It is up to this date document on, as you know, this process. We have 4-year appointments, many of us, meaning that this process is going to go on of refinement for a long time to come. As Councillor Muller says, this is the huge amount of work, but there's also a huge amount of work yet. That's the realistic viewpoint that is accurate. We are going to have, as you know, invited people as well as general public people for our listening sessions on presumably, we will all participate in that too. So I think that, let me put it another way. We have the armature, I'm speaking of sculpture now, we have the armature, which is the wire or the metal that holds the sculpture up. We'll have that, the bones, in other words, huesos in Spanish. And in our tradition of curanderismo, which is incidentally Afro, Mexican Afro, Cuban Afro, many things, it's also Jewish. It's also indigenous from all of the Americas, including all the way from the top of Canada, all the way down to the tip of Tierra del Fuego, which is this tip of South America. In those areas, the idea is you lay the bones down first, then you bring the flesh. We have brought the flesh, and it is not finely shaped yet. It is an approximation, a good approximation. And then after you bring the flesh and the muscle is going to be not us, not the public. It's going to be the final arbiters, the final legislators of who are going to make this into policy, rules, and laws. And then after that, life is breathed into what you have created. Very, but first come the bones, then the muscle and the meat, and then the singing over the bones, you might say, to bring life into it, into the here and now and reality. That's what we are about right now. And just my 2 cents worth way of saying it. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much for your guidance and wisdom, Dr. E. Really appreciate it. Dr. Chavez.
I want to say that I really agree with what Skippy and Dr. E just said, but I want us to keep a close eye on this because I want to make sure that and this is my own personal opinion, the medicine has been guarded, has been taught. All of the universities, all of the healing centers that now exist that are doing work in this area that are using modalities and the practices of the indigenous. That's what's in the world today. And I don't want us to lose focus on that's where we need to focus. Not that we can't stretch that out a bit, but that needs to be the focus, to share those benefits with the indigenous community. Thank you.
Fully heard, Dr. Chavez. And I also want to thank Dr. Gonzales. Perspectives of how we can protect and honor Indigenous lands and Indigenous communities within these equity recommendations was a significant part of our conversation last meeting and all our meetings. So really hear what you're saying, Dr. Chavez, and really appreciate it. Any other questions or comments or thoughts from anyone on the board? And Billy, feel free to jump in as subcommittee chair.
Chair, would it help if there was a motion to approve the Skippy's language to integrate into it?
Great question, Dr. Sisley. Ashley, would you like us to do that amendment now?
I think what would be really helpful would be to help us, let's make sure we have an understanding exactly what you want to include. So, for example, I see in number 9, natural medicine sales charge to benefit social equity through allocations to Indigenous and religious environmentalism, social equity programs, and harm reduction. This charge could also be used to fund data collection or something along those lines, right? Let's figure out what that language is that you're comfortable with, and then I don't think we need to make the motion to adopt that language. I think we'll do that in the adoption of the full document as amended.
Right. Yeah, that was my hope, is that we could do one full motion of all the document as amended. So Skippy, feel free to weigh in on the language you're looking for.
Yeah, Ashley, I would just suggest keeping it as simple as possible. So strike the and before harm reduction, put a comma, write the word and then insert the words data and observational study. And I would just leave it like that.
And I just want to acknowledge Skippy as the author of this. I really celebrate that inclusion. So thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Got it. So as described by Skippy, I've got that incorporated. Is everyone comfortable with that language?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, hearing no objection, Lundy, I'll pass it back to you to carry on.
Fantastic. I saw Billy go off mute, so I just want to take a moment, and if Billy wants to weigh in.
Yes, sorry. I think I was just going to ask Skippy to reshare the language that he shared at the outset, and that all is done. So I'm good. Thank you, though.
Okay, fantastic. One final call for any questions or comments to this subcommittee. Seeing none, thank you so much, Billy, for the update. And we're going to go ahead and take a break so that we can just honor the every hour having just a little time for a bio break. I'm going to request that this time it's a 5-minute break so that we can keep the momentum of this meeting and efficiently move through our agenda and hopefully end on time, if not early. So the board will take a short break and we will be returning at, let's say, 3:12. Please ensure that all cameras are off and everyone is muted during the break. This meeting will resume at 3:12. This is Chairperson Lundy, and it is 3:12 p.m. We are going to jump back into our subcommittee updates. And the next subcommittee that we get to hear from is the Indigenous and Religious Use and Outreach Subcommittee. Dr. Estés, I will pass the baton. Oh, I see some hands. Before I hand it off to you, Dr. Estés, I'm going to answer just a couple questions. Yeah, Dr. Chavez, please.
So, I want to wholeheartedly say I agree with the data, but if we can, I would appreciate just going back to number 9, the sharing of benefits. And would the board be comfortable with the addition of the phrase not to exceed the amount going to the Indigenous? And the reason I'm saying this is because I have experience with researchers and universities, and they have a much louder voice than the Indigenous. And so I just want us, just kind of put that marker there to say, not to exceed, so that whatever goes to collecting the data, which is extremely important. And I agree. How are we going to improve and make things better if we don't have a way to support the data? But I could see it being pulled. I mean, just from past history or past experiences, right? So I'm just wondering if we could just add that, phrase, a short phrase saying not to exceed the amount of benefit sharing with the Indigenous.
No, absolutely. No, I so hear your concern, and Dr. Chavez, if I may just dialogue with you briefly about that. I equally hold concern about the priority going to research over social equity and environmentalism as well. Because those historically have been areas that have been on the fringes and marginalized. Would you feel comfortable if we said not to exceed the amount of those 3 areas?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Would the rest of the board agree with that additional amendment to number 9? Are there any objections? Let me say it that way. Okay, seeing none. Ashley, could we add that language to the amended section of number 9?
Sure. Here's how I've captured it. That a charge on natural medicine products to benefit social equity through allocations to Indigenous and religious, environmentalism, social equity programs, harm reduction, and data and observational study, parenthetical, not to exceed the amount allocated to the allocations to Indigenous and religious, environmentalism, and social equity programs, close parent, period.
Does that capture it, Dr. Chavez?
Yes, thank you all. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Got it.
Thank you for that comment. I'm going to pass to Skippy real quick because I know this is his recommendation he was talking about, and then I'll come to you, Sheriff.
That's totally in line with the spirit of this. I'm just wanting to make sure we're doing our math straight. Because depending on, I'm not looking at it, how those parentheticals are, it could be that data observational study must be lesser than any one of those constituent parts, or all of them added together, which is a much larger number. And I don't think is what you're trying to capture. So I just want to flag out to make sure we're getting our structure right.
Yeah, my understanding is our essence is that it's not more than any of them individually. Dr. Chavez, please chime in if you see it otherwise.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for that refinement, Skippy. I got a thumbs up from Ashley. So, Sheriff, do you have a comment?
I do. I want to thank Dr. Chavez. I think that was a great catch and a great addition to that. So I certainly have no problems with that and completely support that. But I'm about to enter a zone where I'm going to lose service. So I probably want to do my attestation if I could.
You bet. Appreciate you flagging me. Sheriff Lucero, do you attest and affirm that all conflicts of interest have been disclosed?
I attest.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Appreciate you joining us. All right. We all ready to move on to the next update? Okay. All right, so now the third subcommittee update, we get to hear from Indigenous and Religious Use and Outreach. Dr. E, I will hand it off to you for your update.
Thank you, Lundy. First of all, just a bit of background. Colorado originally was inhabited by the Apache. Some people call it Apache, but it's Apache. The Cheyenne Nation, the Shoshone, the Comanche, who covered almost all of Colorado, and the Ute, who are now Ute Mountain and Southern Ute tribes still in Colorado. And so much of what we are doing in our particular subcommittee has to do with the historical erasure of First People who were here. The resonance from the trauma is still alive. And that's why there's a certain amount of care being given in our subcommittee to hear especially from voices of those who are in federally recognized tribes. They are embedded. They live in the culture on a day-to-day basis. They struggle with the current struggles as well as with the historical struggles of the past. We have become clear as we've met that people in the federally recognized tribes, incidentally, there are 574 recognized tribes in the United States, that we understand that those who are embedded in the life and the ways of the tribes do not want people not embedded speaking for them. They want to speak for themselves. And so we've given every avenue for that to happen. We'll have non-voting participants who are members of registered federal tribes who are on the reservations, both here on Arizona and Nuevo Mexico. We'll have Indigenous lawyers who have spoken to us, which has been extremely elucidating. They have been welcoming and they have been of goodwill, and are sometimes surprised, as we ourselves are, that we're all included in this process, because traditionally, people who are mestizo in particular, I think, but who are biracial, Native American and Spanish often, and the people who are from the registered tribes have not been invited to speak, but others have rushed to speak for them in ways that create some idea that there's a monolithic culture amongst the different groups. There is not. We were recently up at the Wind River Reservation, Shoshone, Northern Cheyenne, visiting relatives there. And there is no consensus, but there are literally thousands of stories of how different people see things differently, with a core idea of desire to be respected and invited and received with goodwill. And this is where our group has focused. So we also have had people from La Junta, growers, people who have been embedded with and in the Indigenous communities that exist there, for which we're very grateful for their input. They keep coming back, which we really appreciate. And also we have had experienced people from schools, specifically lawyers who are representing some of the school systems. And we have also had people who have deep spiritual devotion, such as one of our people who has come to us, who has studied with the Shishibo for many years in South America. And so the authenticity of their lived experiences has been important to us. None of us on the committee, because all of us come from ancestors, if not in our own generation, as many of us come from the refugee and immigrant families. We are first generation here in the United States, and we know the sufferings intensely, but also people of other backgrounds that have also experienced Holocaust, displacement, ethnic cleansing, such as Jewish people, for instance, and also, of course, other groups of people. There is, and I say this as a historian of Indigenous history, there is no group that has not been torn asunder by invasion, occupation, colonization, annihilation. There is no group, there are no living people on this earth who are not descendants of those groups, whether it was 1,000 years ago, or 500 years ago, or merely 70 years ago, as it has been in many of our families. So we go forward with that idea in mind that this treasure of plant medicine, which has been cared for, kept alive, often in, you might say, hidden ways, so as to avoid punishment that has rained down from government sources in particular, but also educational and missionary sources and church sources and so on and so forth. All of us are quite aware of what the decimations have been. None of us are without the scars of that. So what we've done is welcome people, especially those who are embedded right now in living day-to-day life, engaged entirely with their own communities that are Indigenous and that are also recognized by the federal government. Ours is to listen as much as we can. That's why we've had many listening sessions up to date in the last 10 months, so people can come, whoever they are, and say whatever they wish to say. And so we have accepted and duly noted what they have said. We also will have, because Ms. Bratton, Mr. Barami, also Councillor Muller, and other people, we will continue having open sessions for people to say their piece within a time-limited way, but also to be duly noted. So that is, you might say, our pattern that we hope to implement in our way of doing things. Now, Skippy Upton-Mesirow and I sent out a preamble to today's report to you all. I hope you received it. I hope you were able to read it. Because what we're saying in that is that the recommendations from our subcommittees are not yet finalized, and telling you why. And the reason for that being isn't necessarily that we don't have enough information yet. We certainly do. We have more, and more all the time. It is that the recommendations that have been made by Indigenous people, by people who are living the day-to-day lives, the people who are in Santeria, curanderismo, and other modes, all of which are not necessarily in agreement with one another, but have a core understanding of the sacred quality of plant medicine, for sure. That when we think that the recommendations that have been made, that our subcommittee has put here, that you see before you now, about time of study, about showing who you have studied with, for instance, about qualifying, the processes that you've been through for these many years, that this is not yet complete. So we've put our preliminary, yet to be shaped, yet to be finalized here for your consideration, with the proviso that we are unable at this time to make a definitive final statement I hope that you can understand that our process of creating a new way through means taking the best of the new ways and the best of the old ways and weaving them together. And we are so appreciative of the goodwill of those who have come to help us do this, that come from administration, that come from government, that come from the governor's office, that come from DOR, that come from DORA, that come from the public, that come from the people who have come to us as participants and what I think of as witnesses to their own lived experiences, who are speaking about the preciousness of this sacramental work that we're engaged in. So what Skippy has put together here is that he, hold on un momentito, is that the challenges of this subcommittee require an exploratory approach navigating the complexities of our recommendations with previously unincluded communities that hold differing points of view. They are not monolithic. They do not all agree with each other. No one person can speak for all. And that is part of what we are listening for. Listening. We have, because of the historic inequities, Skippy goes on, and also the, outright traumas established by legal means, we have to continue our process. And that's why I've said earlier that we hope to have a few more subcommittee meetings, in addition to the profound open public listening sessions we will be doing, not only in the past, which we've done many, but also in the future. That's why those are very important. So Skippy again says to meet our English is not my first language. To meet our statutory, is that, yeah, statutory?
Statutory, yes.
Like she said, yes, requirements. Our work demands flexibility and iteration, not operating within established parameters. We continue to refine our language and recommendations as we learn. And the legislature will need to remain open and flexible with us over time as we work to honor and include the communities. Now, let me just say this last thing, and then I will say, if you have read our recommendations and you'll have questions, that we will try to answer them. There is, in living memory, what some would call PTSD in many of our communities. My community, other people's community. I have 3 grandsons. One's Northern Cheyenne, one's Dine, and one is Mestizo Curandero from Mexico, who has Mexican citizenship and United Statesian citizenship, who was born in the United States. I'm very aware of the struggles and you might call it residue, but in some cases you would call it full suffering of trauma that was experienced in the boarding schools. There are many right now initiatives to bring the still living voices of those who were scooped up in a gigantic and horrendous and not unprecedented taking away of the children. We saw that at the southern border with the Mexicanos, the Venezuelans who have come to our border, where someone decided that the best deterrent is to kidnap their children from them. And that was within the last 5 years. So this resonance with, and I'm just going to speak at the boarding schools, of trauma still being exist on. We want very much to attend to that in as careful a way as possible. And I just want, for those who may not know, and I'm pretty sure you all know, that the sentiment by Colonel Henry Pratt, who opened the most number of boarding schools, was kill the Indian, save the man. The girls taken from boarding schools were remitted to the work of servants, learning to iron, cook, launder, without any consideration whatsoever for their innate talents, for their God-given spirit, for their calling, and for their relationship to their elders in their own communities. He said that he was wanting to acculturate or assimilate the quote-unquote savages, when in fact it appears that his intention truly was to annihilate enormous groups of people. And so knowing these matters and knowing them in depth means that we hope to continue to make the best listening we can to those who were directly impacted and those who live that reality right now in their groups along with others, and to make our focus toward that. I wish I could say that we could protect everyone, that we could make everyone's dreams come true. It is, we don't have the power to do that. What we have the power to do is to make recommendations. I'm very clear on that, as is my subcommittee, that what we're attempting to do is put forth the most salient, the most sturdy, in one way, the most ironclad that we can about how to go forward in a realistic but also sacred manner. And so that is why the recommendations that we've made today to you here have to be understood as in progress, in process. Creating a new world like this, it's not static. It can never be flattened out. It will be ever evolving. I promise you that 5 years and 10 years from now, as Ian Siep knows, who is the director, has been the director of the rollout of the marijuana processes in the state of Colorado, that it is an ongoing evolution, and that new things will be added for years yet to come that will be hopefully good and shape things even in a better way. But for now, this is the armature and this is where we're at. So thank you for listening to me. And if you have questions about our recommendations, if please, our chair, Lundy, if you will call on people in the order that they raise their hand, I would so appreciate you.
You bet, Dr. Estés. Thank you always for your updates and your wisdom and guidance. Really appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Estés or this subcommittee? Or comments? Looks like you covered it, Dr. E. Yes, please.
Dr. Sofia Chavez, Dr. Martinez, Skippy Upton-Mesirow, Ricardo Baca, Dr. Sisley have been inestimable people to walk with in trying to delve into and understand this enormous challenge that's been put in front of us with very little how can I say it, there isn't a manual written about how to proceed in this way in the state of Colorado with regard to the sacramental. We are charged with creating together with our co-partners, of which incidentally are also with respect to DORA, DOR, the AG's office, all of the administrators, all of the directors, all of the people who have come to us to offer their point of view and to help to guide us. And there's not a one that I can think of at the moment who hasn't come open-hearted and open-handed and wanting to help create together. It's true that sometimes there are people who are, understandably thinking that maybe they're not listened to. And also that's what our listening sessions are for. And it is our way of saying, come, you're welcome here. We will listen. We will duly note whatever it is you have to say. And we will do so with regard and respect. And so let me end, I think, there. Again, our recommendations of how long one needs to practice, how many hours, what kinds of, what we're calling, hold on, let me think of what we call it. It's expression of excellence, how we have learned to do well and do good with the kind of helping healing work we do with the sacred principles that have been handed down for generation upon generation within our ancestry. So it is like how to demonstrate that we have had training that is different than or might be concomitant with academic training, for instance, but that academic training is not the sole sphere that is the final decider. So I think I've probably said it 3 different ways now. And so, again, appreciate so much your listening. Thank you.
You bet, Dr. Estés. Thank you for those clarifications. And Skippy, thank you for articulating these initial recommendations for the subcommittee as well. I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, we all get to be lucky enough to be on the receiving end of all the kind words and observations from Dr. E. So I just wanted to take a moment as a subcommittee member to reflect back what an incredible leader we have. It is a incredibly challenging thing to do, to stand in the face of legal process and statute and requirement and affirm that we will do this differently, that we will both honor the timeline set forth by the people, but also recognize that the system as it's currently constructed is not good enough. It hasn't served these communities. And to be willing to stand in that is a very challenging thing to do in so many ways. And Dr. E does it with immense grace, kindness, compassion, listening, celebration of others in a way that I have almost never seen. And I just want to say how lucky we all are to be working with you and how grateful we are to have you leading our subcommittee. There's no one else better to do it.
Thank you, Skippy. As chairperson, I want to concur as well. Any other questions or comments for this subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We are going to move on to the Products Research and Data Subcommittee. This is the subcommittee that Vice Chair Dr. Connor is the subcommittee chair of, and he is not with us today. So I asked if Dr. Sisley would be able to provide a brief high-level update for the subcommittee's work. Dr. Sisley?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The last meeting we had was definitely a really spirited discussion over just finalizing these last draft recommendations that are in the version 10. So maybe I won't, delay further because we have to dig into this material, but I just want to commend this. The content in this committee is so technical, and I am sure that if Chair Connor were here, he'd want to acknowledge the immense work from these experts. We just had access to some of the very best minds in the state who were able to weigh in on these things and really set us straight on some things, where we didn't understand. And so I think between the comments from these experts at each meeting, plus we had some really good comments at the listening session that DOR facilitated that was that I think also contributed to our final recommendation. So hopefully we can start looking at this. I just want to highlight a couple things that I thought were may still be controversial is about the extractions. We talked a lot about the need to ban solvents like ethanol, methanol, and I am still concerned that that might be a point of controversy that we'll have to revisit later. Methanol and ethanol are commonly used solvents for extraction in the industry, and they're used widely in Oregon. So may have to look back at that. And then I also wanted to bring up the issue of active versus inactive ingredients. That this was also a area of a lot of debate at the last meeting, talking about what ingredients should we be prohibiting, and the concern, of course, is that obviously in prohibiting, banning substances that could be overtly intoxicating, like alcohol or other combining other psychedelics should be banned. But there's plenty of herbal supplements, people stacking with things like lion's mane or other mushrooms, kanna, things like that. And we want to talk more about whether those should be prohibited or allowed. So I know, I don't know, Chair, if you want to, Skippy was also at the meeting, so he may have thoughts as well.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you for those highlights. Skippy, would you like to add anything?
No, I'm so glad you covered those technical aspects in the detail you did, because I was going, am I going to have no, that's great. I think in addition, we kind of made some final nips and tucks to include some of the Indigenous feedback into the regulations, things like outdoor cultivation license and just some of the technical jargon around that. And then lastly, I think it's worth noting that there is sort of a subcommittee desire to focus on data and research, but we recognize that that's in the parking lot right now. And so we just sort of noted that as an intention to come back to.
Absolutely. I'll also note that I acknowledge the importance of data and research within the equity recommendations as well. So I think it is noted in several spaces. And as someone who's been part of this subcommittee and not trained in these worlds, I also wanted to reiterate the technical language. At times I was like, is this English? Trying to understand all the words and details, but just really appreciate how everyone dug into the nuances of how we can maintain quality and efficacy and thoughtfulness with this subcommittee's recommendations. So does anyone have any questions or comments for this subcommittee? Okay. Seeing none, thank you so much, Dr. Sisley and Skippy, for those updates. Really appreciate it. The last subcommittee that we get to hear from today is Qualifications, Licensing, and Training. Dr. Hannum is the subcommittee chair, and I will pass it over to you for that update. Thanks so much, Dr. Hannum.
Thank you, Chair Lundy. I appreciate it. So we met just yesterday, so this is all fairly fresh, and a new version of the consolidated recommendations was sent out yesterday prior to this meeting with our updates. And they are fairly substantive, so just want to kind of acknowledge that there have been some changes as a result of that meeting, but I think overall those changes are for the better, and that these recommendations are stronger as a result of our meeting yesterday. So just to highlight a few things, in terms of the licenses piece, there was some clarification of language about the role of medical providers and what that looks like. So that's a fairly small piece, but wanted to highlight that. We also did add in a new license type for distinguished educator licenses, which is designed to be a bridge license to allow a lower level license for individuals who are experts in the field in different areas who could contribute to education and training in the state of Colorado without having to go through all the onerous process of getting licensed as a full facilitator in the state of Colorado. So that section has been added and was modified yesterday. Then Dr. Connor spent time in between our December meeting and our meeting yesterday working with the education requirements and reorganizing those and making those more succinct, so taking out redundancies. Just to highlight a couple of things, we did add in training about natural medicine and chronic pain. That was a recommendation from a non-voting participant since the last meeting that was brought forth through Lori Bratton and Sam Brummy. Lengthen the hours for the trauma module and the self-care module. The rest of the changes in the education section are more about reorganization and making sure that we're not putting the same requirements in multiple places. We then did spend a lot of time about information about accelerated licenses, and I want to give a special thanks to Dr. Estés and the Indigenous and Religious Use Subcommittee for their contributions there, trying to make sure that what we have in here reflects those recommendations, but is also a little broader in case there are other individuals that might be seeking accelerated licenses. So, for example, individuals who are already licensed in the state of Oregon. And then we spent some time developing some standards, recommendations for standards for the 6-month consultation period that we have recommended. So that was a recommendation from a non-voting participant, and we spent some time drafting some of that yesterday, so you'll see that towards the bottom here. And then finally, we did make a recommendation that the state consider approving authorized locations other than licensed healing centers. So that might include participants' residences, especially for participants that are homebound or are in hospice care, but might also include other locations. And it's a recommendation that that be examined and more data be gathered about that for the state. And I would welcome anyone from the subcommittee to speak more. I guess I should highlight, we are now at 150 hours for these education requirements, which is an increase, does represent an increase from the last time I presented on this material. So I would love questions or other information from other subcommittee members.
Thank you, Dr. Hannum. Any questions or comments? Yeah, Skippy.
You may have said this, Dr. Hannum. I zoned out for like 2 minutes, if I'm being honest, I apologize. But as far as new things, just so everyone can consider it, we, I think, added a recommendation that healing centers and licensed facilities should be treated, or we recommend are treated in zoning as medical uses, service and other service uses, and comport with, not exact language, I'm trying to do this from memory, with local zoning regulations around home use. And the intention behind that is to make the adoption of these roles a simple administrative choice, as opposed to requiring lengthy, multifaceted public processes in every municipality in the state.
Yes, thank you for adding that, Skippy. I'm sorry that I didn't have that in my synopsis, but thank you.
Important point. I appreciate that clarity too. Dr. Sisley.
Yeah, Dr. Hannum, is there something in here about naturopathic doctors and where they fit in the sphered licensing world? I'm trying to see if I know each state is different how they handle naturopathic docs and their oversight, but I didn't see anything in the document about it, and I think they're going to be crucial.
Yeah, and so right now they're considered part of that license 1, and that's just reflecting our intention to make sure we're working in conjunction with our sister boards like the medical board, but they are mentioned specifically.
Okay, I didn't see that. Okay, and then I wanted to ask about, I was reading the part about the the accelerated training and trying to figure out the language. So if somebody applies who's been trained in Oregon, but hasn't seen the 40 participants yet, so they did the didactic portion in Oregon but didn't get the practicum, then they would only have to do the practicum, right? They don't have to repeat the didactic.
Yes, that's the intention, except it depends on what training they did. Because our training, originally when we first started this work, our goal was to make the education requirements in Colorado somewhat similar to the education requirements in Oregon. And that has changed over time for a variety of reasons. Some of that is because of the feedback we've gotten from non-voting participants, also from voting subcommittee members, but also because of data that's coming out of the state of Oregon, suggesting that facilitators there are feeling like they're not getting enough training in certain areas. So one of the things that I think Dora specifically is going to have to figure out is what to do in that situation. If someone was trained based on the standards in Oregon, they're not going to quite meet the standards in Colorado in certain areas. And so it might mean they have to take additional modules, but hoping training programs would offer those modules individually for those folks.
Okay, that's helpful. And I just want to ask, in the peer support, like the idea for continuing education, is it possible that peer support groups can also count towards their total hours for continuing ed?
That's explicitly stated.
Oh, good. Okay, I wasn't clear on that. Okay, thank you so much. That's great.
Thank you, Dr. Sisley.
Ashley?
Thanks so much. I want to change the subject, and so I'm sorry to derail this conversation. It's come to my attention that there is a member of the public who has been sending repeated chat messages in the chat function. I don't have access to that, so I'm not seeing it, but I understand that it is becoming increasingly disruptive for board members. And what I want to offer out is that everyone in the public should not be using the chat function. This is not a stakeholder engagement meeting. This is a meeting for the board to have conversation among themselves to talk about their agenda. So I want to reiterate that this is not a stakeholder feedback meeting. There will be opportunities to do so. As we have stated many times in this meeting, these recommendations are the board's policy decisions that they are making recommendation to DORA and to Department of Revenue with respect to the substantive issues that should be addressed in the development of the rules. As agencies develop their rules, there will be many, many, many opportunities for stakeholder engagement and for individuals to participate and provide both written and oral feedback to DOR and to DORA during that process. I am going to ask that the individual who continues to message the board members, please stop. Please stop now. This is not the time for that. You are welcome to provide written feedback right now if you would like to the email address for the program. You are also absolutely invited to come and participate in every stakeholder meeting that both DOR and DORA have. But because of the disruptiveness that is occurring in this meeting, I realize we're coming to a close, but I will remove you from the meeting if you continue to disrupt the board members. So thank you for your cooperation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ashley. Any more questions for Dr. Hannum and the Qualifications, Licensing, and Training Subcommittee, or comments by the board? Seeing none, thank you so much, Dr. Hannum, for all the work, technical and otherwise, and just really appreciate all that you shared so that we're informed about this subcommittee. All right, everyone. I'm excited to share that we're moving on to agenda item number 7, the approval of the consolidated recommendations as amended. And so I am going to go ahead and briefly open up any final discussion. Skippy, I see your hand raised. Please.
All right, very talkative today. I just wanted to circle back before adoption. We had some pretty robust discussion about moving forward the code of ethics, but also possibly inserting some qualifying language for points 4 through 13. And I just wanted to check in on where we are with that before we approve of it. And if any additional language is needed, I did take our last break to draft something, which may or may not suit the board's needs, but I at least put something down if helpful.
Ashley, where are we at with those inclusions from emergency and response amendments?
Oh, let me get back. Well, I am looking at it. Sorry, I am in a different part of the matter, but did I understand that Skippy had taken some notes down on that provision? We might want to.
Yeah, Skippy, why don't you go ahead and share what you wrote down during the break, and then we can make sure that it correlates.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm going to say this out loud at normal pace just to see if it's even anyone's worth considering. If so, I can go back slower for typing. But what I heard is we're specifically calling out 4 through 13, these sort of relational areas, as places that the board seeks to, and this would be like the qualifying statement. The board seeks to improve Ethical Code Section E, items 4 through 13, related to relationality by learning from and integrating Indigenous practices and wisdom over time. Expect changes to come. That's the qualifier. The additional piece, or the second piece that we may put into that section up top to protect those other licenses would be, and this is, I'm totally not legal, so someone is going to have to write this, but any facilitator who holds additional licenses should consider the Natural Medicine Advisory Board Ethics Code to be a baseline and shall be bound by the strictest license that they hold when conducting natural medicine work, or something thereof.
Okay. And I would also like to add the inclusion of an acknowledgement of the impact of the ethical code as stated on underrepresented and historically marginalized communities, and that the board will continue to revise and update these ethical codes in light of that.
Agreed.
Based on Skippy's statement and my addition, do any other board members have any comments or questions or opposition? Seeing none, Ashley, do you have what you need from us for those amendments to the emergency response inclusions?
No, I'm sorry. I'm still dealing with people who are inappropriately messaging your folks.
Okay, then I'm gonna give you just a moment, and then we can let me know when you're ready.
Okay.
Give us 1 second.
Okay.
I know these meetings aren't recorded as well, so if we have a verbal affirmation from people to vote to move it forward, we could also type and send these in, both Lundy and I's suggestions, so that you guys can incorporate them. If that works for you process-wise, but that may be easier given the nature of capturing longer words.
I actually appreciate that that thought quite a bit. I think that you guys have gone through it a couple of times now. I don't want to belabor the point in front of the rest of the board. I think you've probably had an opportunity to kind of vet through those concepts. If everyone is consistent with that, and if they are comfortable with us working with the two of you to get that language kind of drilled down on E4 through 13, I'm amenable to that, and that makes sense to me. And I apologize. I don't want to slow down this train any more than I need to.
You bet, Ashley. Thank you. Then I'll just briefly open the floor to see, do any board members have opposition to Skippy and I providing the AGs with this language? Okay. Then seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consolidated recommendations as amended?
I will move to approve the consolidated recommendations as amended, including verbal amendments, which will be submitted to staff by end of the day in written form that mirror exactly the language approved by the board.
Seconded, well done.
And a friendly amendment, if I might, offer it up. There was also language included in paragraph 9 in the equity provisions regarding the collection of sales charge for to include data and observational study, although not to exceed the amount allocated to any of those allocations to Indigenous and religious environmentalism and social equity programs.
Yes, I had intended that to be included in the amendments in the initial motion, but in case it's unclear, I accept the friendly amendments. Will, you'll have to accept that one too.
I thought for sure that's what you said. I still second.
That's what I've intended, but I appreciate that, that we clarified. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes and we have our initial set of recommendations, folks. Let's give ourselves a round of applause, huh?
Is there a champagne emoji on here?
Way to go, team. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Discussion of the next meeting. The next full board meeting is scheduled for the third Friday of the month, which is February 16th, 2024 at 1 p.m. I would like to reiterate to board members the commitment to attend these meetings. A quorum is required to hold a meeting, so please review the upcoming dates and let the program director, Lori Bratton, know if you are aware of any meetings that you cannot attend this year. As unknown life events naturally occur, we ask that board members provide at least 2 weeks' notice of an absence for any unexpected events. If it isn't possible, we ask that you get in touch with Lori as soon as possible for any last-minute absences. I will now move to close the meeting with attestations. Do you attest and affirm that all conflicts of interest have been disclosed? I, Chair Lundy, attest. Vice Chair Dr. Brad Connor is absent. Dr. Tina Gonzales?
I attest.
Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estés Reyes?
I attest.
Commissioner Wendy Buxton-Andrade?
I attest.
Dr. Sofia Chavez?
I attest.
Skippy Upton-Mesirow?
I attest.
Ricardo Baca is absent. Sheriff David Lucero already provided his attestation. Will Dunn?
I attest.
Dr. Joshua Goodwin is absent. Dr. Alisa Hannum?
I attest.
Dr. Sue Sisley?
I attest.
Billy Wynne?
I attest.
Stacie Loucks?
Stacie, you're muted.
Stacie? I will come back. Dominique Mendiola?
I attest.
Stacie, are you back with us?
I'll be happy to email Stacie for her attestation.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Before we make a motion to adjourn, there's a few items to be addressed. I would like to thank everyone for attending and participating in today's meeting. Again, the next meeting will be Friday, February 16th at 1 p.m. If you're unable to attend the meeting, please let the program director know. And Dr. Estés, I'd like you to provide a closing word before I make the motion.
Thank you. Both of them defined very hard. Thank you so much, and thank you, everybody. I just want to note that this 65-page document, when you write a book, it's about 250 words per page. This is actually about a 135-page book. It says 65 pages, but it's really 135 pages. And I almost can't find words to thank you, Lundy, on all the people who put this so carefully together. I witnessed you over all these months, carefully taking this thread and that thread and trying to cover all the bases, including child welfare, animal welfare, soil content. I mean, so many things. I've often joked that it's like trying to put 10 pounds of mud in a 5-pound bag. But you know what? I think that this 135 pages is putting about 135 pages worth of worthwhile things into 135 pages. I think it's a pretty darn good fit for as far as we've come. So thank you for that. Dios te bendiga. May you be watched over. May you be blessed in every way. Keep your heart open, your eyes set on the goals that matter most. Your care of others and their care of you. May you be in every way kept safe. May you be blessed, walked with, kept safe, and in every single way, be preserved, strengthened, hopeful, even happy, until we see you all again. Adios.
Thanks, Dr. E.
Dr. E, happy birthday in a couple days.
Thank you.
May I have
Yes.
may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn, well done.
Second, Billy. Wet.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. This meeting of the Colorado Natural Medicine Advisory Board has adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful.
Thank you.
Appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.